Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, we're going to be creating this project expense tracker. It can also be used as an event expense tracker, so you're just replacing the project expenses with event expenses. It should work perfectly for both scenarios. I'll give you a quick overview of the template so you can see if it's something that works for you before we get started with the tutorial. We have a section here that would allow you to update part of this dashboard to show project specific information. So if I change this from client B to website redesign, this part of the template adapts. So it shows you the budget / income for that project, the expenses, and if you're over or under budget. This section here shows you all of the expenses for all of the projects entered into the database. Here we have some graphs. The first one is a category distribution. The second one is a subcategory distribution or breakdown of the expenses. And down here, we have a graph that displays all of the monthly expenses. This tab is where you would enter in all of the expenses that feeds into the dashboard. And finally, we have a setup tab, and here is where we would add and edit all of the drop downs that would fit into the tracker tab. Alright, so here is my tutorial checklist. In addition to having this checklist, I will divide this video into chapters because videos like this tend to be really long. Hopefully using the chapters and the checklist would allow you to go through this video a lot easier. I'll cross this off because we have gone over the template overview. The first thing we're going to do is create the setup tab, which is this tab right here. Alright, so let's get started with a brand new sheet. I'll click on add a new sheet. I'll name this setup tab 2. All right, and then I'm going to clean up the sheet, and that just means I'm applying the font that I want to use to the entire sheet all at once. I change the alignments to what I want, and then I'm going to remove the excess rows and columns. So back to the setup tab, I don't need anything after J and any row after 19. All right, the next thing I'll do is change the size of the rows, select everything, right click, resize. I'll make this 30. I'm going to select every other column, so A, C, E, G, J, keeping these two together, right click, resize 30. All right, then these columns, select all of them at once because I'm going to change the size as well, 300. Select all of row 2, merge, and call this drop downs. All right, so start by selecting this entire area. So this is where the table is going to go. I'm going to add a border, change the color to this color. Make sure it's this first border that's selected. So add a border and then just add another border around the header area. So it looks like this. So here's the header and here is the border around the entire table. And I'm going to add some horizontal borders. So I'll select the entire inner area. Back to borders. I'll change the color to this lighter color. Change the style to the dotted line and select horizontal borders. Now you may not see it very clearly because I still have the grid lines on. When I take it off, you should be able to see it. Next, select this. All right. Use the paint format option and just paste it here. Select one more time, paste, and here, and here. And then this is going to be category, subcategory, vendor name, and project name. If you're using this as an event planner, call this your event name. And here would be budget or income. So if it's a project, it would be budget. And if it's an event, it would be the income you're expecting to receive for that event. All right, I want to add a row underneath this drop down header. So click on 2, insert row below, click back to borders, add a border. And here is where you would add whatever colors you want to use. I am going to be using colors from the theme colors. This allows you to be able to easily change the colors in the future if you change your mind. So I'll apply this color here to the header. And then for these ones, I'll select all of them at once and apply this color to them. For contrast, I'll change the colors here and here for the text to white, and I'll leave everything else black. Now that we're done with the structure of the tables, I will remove the grid lines. Click View, Show Grid Lines. All right. Now I will add some of the placeholder information. If you have your information ready, so if you know the categories that you want to track and the subcategories and the vendors, go ahead and add them now. If you don't, you're welcome to use whatever placeholder information you have so we can continue with the process of creating the template. I will be reusing my placeholder information. So I'll copy the ones that I have here and then I'll paste it in the template that we are creating. All right, and if you do need to extend this area, just select any of the rows in between, right click and insert rows to make it longer if you have a long list of categories, subcategories, or any of the drop downs. All right, so one more thing I want to make sure we format is this budget area. Right now it shows up in the dollar format because I copied the information from the setup example tab. But if it wasn't formatted, you go ahead and select the entire area. You can apply the formatting that shows up as your default currency, or you can go to format, number, and you can choose from any of the options here. To complete the setup tab, I will add colors here. So I'm selecting everything all at once, and I'm using this lighter color. Select this entire row, make it bold. All right, back to our checklist. We have completed this step, so I'll check it off. Next, we're going to create the expense tracker. So here is where we would enter in all of the expenses that we need to track for our project or for our event. We'll start again with a brand new sheet, and I'll do the same thing, reformat it, rename the sheet. Next, select column A and column K, resize that to 30. And I already resized the rows to 30 when I was cleaning out the sheet, so you can go ahead and do so as well. I'll leave the first row blank. Select the second row, right click, resize this to 90, and this is going to be our header. So we can go ahead and select everything, merge it, and add a border around it, and call this project expense tracker. All right, and make this bigger. So maybe go all the way to 24, and I like to make it bold so it stands out. And we'll add our table starting from here. Start by adding a border around the header area. Select all the way down to 1,000 because this is meant to be something we can use to enter as many entries as possible. So I will not be deleting any of the rows. Select all the way down, add a border around it, and then add some internal horizontal borders. Change it to the lighter color, change the style to this dotted line and horizontal internal borders. Click on that. And then you can apply vertical borders if you want. I'm not going to do so. I'll just leave it like this and click on view, show, and grid line so you can see what it looks like so far. And then I'm just going to add some colors to the table right now. And now what I'm going to do next is just copy these placeholder data that I have from the example, because I'm going to be using the exact same ones. Go back here and I'm just going to paste values only. Next, we need to resize the column. So for example, it's currently at the default 100 width, which will work for some of the column entries, but not all of them. So for example, the item name needs to be a lot wider. So I'm going to resize this to 300. All right, I'll keep the dates, the month, and the amount as 100. Select the next 4, and I'll make these 200. And you could always readjust this based on your specific needs. So if you have really long project names or category names or vendor names, you can readjust it to fit your specific needs. And then for notes section, of course, we can make this a lot wider. So I'll make this 400. Next, we're going to format the cells and create drop downs. Starting with the first one, we don't need to do anything here. So we'll skip to the next one. To format this, we're going to just select a few rows and then use my shortcut keys to allow me to select the entire column all at once. So I'm going to use Shift, Command, and the down arrow key. All right. And then what I'm going to do is go back to Format, Number, and do Custom Date and Time. So you have a variety of options you can pick from. I will select this one right here. This one that has the abbreviated month, the day, and the year. And you can click here if you want to change it even further. So I'll leave it as the abbreviated month. Click Apply. Go back to the top. The next column is also going to have a date entry, but instead of having it formatted with the month, date, and year, we want it formatted as month and year only. So we're going to do the same thing. Select the entire column, Format, Number, Custom Date and Time, and now we're going to remove the day. Okay, so just delete and remove the comma and the extra space. So now it only has month and year. Click Apply. All right. The next column is amount, so we're going to do the same thing, which is select the entire column and click on the currency. And if you want to use a different format, go ahead and click on Format, Number, and choose a currency. For this template, we're going to use this format as currency. For the next 4 columns, we're going to use drop downs that we created in the Setup tab. First, we'll start with the project name. Select a few rows under project name, go to Data Validation, Add Rule. Before we do anything though, we're going to remove F10. So F10 is showing up here as the last row because that's all we selected. But once we remove it, it's going to select the entire column all the way down to 1,000. Change the criteria to drop down from range. Click on this icon that says select data range. Go to our setup tab. Now we're going to add our project name. Okay, so select the entire range under project name. Click OK. Let's go back to our templates. So you can see that the drop down has been applied. Go to advanced options. The chip shows up as the default. You can change that to arrow or plain text. I'll leave it as chip for now. And if you want to change the colors that are assigned to the different projects or events, here's what you would do. So click on the circle icon next to the name of the project or your event and assign a color to them. All right, once you're done with this section, click done, and you should be able to select a name of a project. All right, we'll repeat the same steps for expense category, subcategory, and vendor. The last column is the notes section. We don't need to make any changes to that column. Let's start by entering one example. So for item name, let's say office supplies. One thing I forgot to do is to add the date picker option. So we're going to do that right now. So select a few rows, data validation, add rule, remove 10. So it selects the entire column. Change this from drop down to is valid date. All right. And you can reject the input and click done. Okay. So now when we go ahead and try to add a date, all we need to do is to double click and the date picker option shows up and it should be applied to any of the rows in this column. All right. So enter the name and the date. What we need to show up here is the month and the year, but we want it to be the month and the year from this column. All we need to do is reference the cell. And to do this, click in the cell, the month and year cell equals, and click in the date cell and hit enter. It's copying the exact date, but it's only showing it as a month and a year. This is going to be useful when we create the graph in the dashboard tab. All right, so we'll need to copy this all the way down. So click on the cell. We're going to do copy and select the entire range all the way down. Right click, paste formula only. All right, so now if you double click here, you can see it's referencing this cell, which is what it's supposed to do. Next, we're going to enter an amount. So let's say office supplies, we spent $450. Now let's assign this expense to a project name. So let's say office renovation, and the category would be office supplies. Subcategory would be equipment. And let's say we bought this from ABC Contractors. And then you could add in whatever notes you need to add. All right. So before I add the rest of the placeholder information, I want to add a filter. To do this, select the entire header and you're going to click on create a filter. Click that right here. Once you do this, you're going to notice that it will add a tiny little filter next to each column in the table. This would allow you to filter your table by the different headers in the table. For example, if you want to see the expenses related to only one project, let's go to our table that has a lot more entries. So let's say I only want to see client B campaign. I should be able to click on this filter, clear everything, click client B campaign, click OK, and it only shows me that project name. So that's why this filter is very useful, because you can filter by every single column in the table. All right, so the next thing I want to do is add in my placeholders. I am going to reuse the placeholders that I used to create this table. So you can use placeholders as well. If you already have your data, go ahead and enter that information into your table. One thing I want to point out is if you have your filter not covering all of the data that you have entered into your table, go ahead and remove the filter and reapply it. To remove the filter, hover around the icon that says remove filter, okay? And then you can just reselect the table heading and reapply the filter, and now you can see it applies it to all of the data in the table. All right, back to our checklist. We have completed the tracker table, so check that off, and we have entered some placeholders, so I can check this off as well. Next, we're going to create the dashboard tab, and here's what that tab looks like. So we'll start with another blank sheet. We'll call this dashboard 2. All right, so here is what I have done so far. I removed all of the rows after 14 and the columns after M, and I resized the rows to 30. And next thing I'm going to do is resize column A and M, change that to 30 as well. All right, and we'll start with adding our dashboard header. So that's going to be row 2, highlight, resize, make it 90. So select the entire range, merge, and you can add your color here and add your title. So this would be the project dashboard. All right, and then make this bigger and bold. Next, we're going to create a section right here. So the section with the different boxes, the summary amount, and then we need to add columns in between each of them. Okay, so back to our dashboard, it's going to be every other column. So this column, selecting every other column and right click 30. And then we'll select the actual columns, which would also be every other column, right click 200. And then go to row 7, right click, resize that, make that 90. Next, we're going to add borders around the middle table. The narrow one and the wider one, select both of them, add the border, and around the header area. All right, so now that we've done that for one, we can just use the paint formats and reapply it to the rest of the sections. All right, just going back real quick, we need to merge these cells and need to merge these cells. All right, so we'll merge these ones and these ones. All right, so next we're going to add a drop down in the section right here. This is going to be a drop down for your event name if you're using it as an event tracker, or your project name. Click on data validation and add rule, change it to drop down from range, click on the icon, go back to our setup tab, select the project name section, all the way down, click done, click on advanced option, change it to arrow and click done. Okay, so now when I click on this, I can select the name of my project. All right, okay, so this section here is going to display information for the name of the project we have selected here. And this area is going to show summary information for all of the projects that we have entered into the tracker. So we'll add a little header here that says select project name. And here I'll add my border outline and just type budget and expenses for all projects. We need to add some headers here. So I'll just copy that from the example to save time. So select this entire range and go back to dashboard, paste values only. All right, so the first one is going to be project budget. So if you're using this for your event tracker, this would be your event income. Project expenses, again, this is going to be project expenses for the project we have selected here. This is going to display if we're over or under budget. So it's going to take the difference between these two. And then here we'll have our total budget / income. So again, everything that's entered into the table, all of the expenses, and also this would show if we're over or under budget. Before we enter the formulas, I am going to apply some colors. So go ahead and apply whatever colors that work for you. Next, we're going to add the formulas that go into these sections. Back to our example. So here's the formula. I'm going to copy it. All right. And then I'm going to paste it in my dashboard tab. But before I do that, I'm going to change the name. Okay, because if I paste this formula, you can see the name that it's referencing is this setup tab, but I'm going to reference this setup to tab. So if you have your tab name different, by the way, here's where you would change it. So if you're not calling your setup tab, you're calling it something else, go ahead and change it now. So I'm just changing it to match the setup tab that I'm using for this example. So that would be setup 2. And because there's a space, I'm going to have to add this space and add quotes around them. All right, so now it changes color to show that it recognizes that sheet name. Do the same for this. Add a quote, space 2, and then add a quote. And now it recognizes that sheet name as well, and click enter. Okay, and what this is doing, right, if I double click, you can see that it is referencing cell D4. Cell D4 is the name of the project, and it's looking for the amount that's assigned to that project name. So if we go back to our setup tab, we're going to look for client B campaign. That should say $12,000. So if we go back here, setup 2, all right, client B campaign is assigned $12,000. So what that formula is doing is looking for the name here that we've selected to match the name here, and that it pulls the amount next to that name. So I want to change the size of this text. So I'll select this and all of them and go to the text and change the size to 24, maybe smaller. Let's make that 21, bold. Okay. Next, we're going to add a formula here. And what this formula is going to do is going to create a sum of all of the expenses that matches the name we have selected in cell D4. Back to the example. Again, make this bigger so it's easier to see the formula. All right, so if I double click here, you can see that it's a sum filter formula. So first it's going to filter the project name that matches what we have selected in D4, okay? And then it's going to add up all of the amounts. We're going to copy the formula, all right? And here we're going to paste it right here. We're going to do the same thing because we're not using this sheet, we're using this sheet. So it's going to be Project Expense Tracker 2. And change the name as well here, Project Expense Tracker, okay, space and 2. And once it changes color like this, you know that it has recognized the name of the sheet and it shouldn't give you any error message. Before I hit enter, I need to double check the row number. So this says E8 and F8. If we go to the project expense tracker, the example that we copied the formula from, it does start from E8, so that makes sense. But if we go to our example, we actually started from E5 because the structure is slightly different. So we need to adjust the formula to make sure that it starts filtering from E5 instead of E8. So back here, double click, we're going to change this from 8 to 5. All right, and change F from F8 to F5. Okay, and now we can hit enter. All right, so the formula looks like it's working fine. We're going to double check, change this back to 100 by changing the project name. So let's change it from Client B campaign to website redesign. All right, so it updates to be $7,000. We can go back to our table. All right, and I'm going to filter by website redesign. So clear, select website redesign, click OK. Okay, so now we know the only entries here are for website redesign. Now we can add these numbers. So it's just select the amounts. All right. And then when you go down here, you can see the sum of the amounts selected is $7,000. And here shows $7,000. So we know that the formula works the way it's supposed to. If you are making this template with me, my recommendation is to use the exact same rows and column location that I'm using. So all you need to do is copy and paste the formulas and they should work perfectly. But if you're not going to be using the same rows and columns because you've made some changes to fit your specific needs, just make sure you double click the formula and check the locations to make sure it matches the locations in the reference table. The other thing I'm going to mention is that if you are a part of my Patreon, you will get the copy of this template that we're creating today. So what I usually do at the end of the tutorial is I will make a copy of this template, which would include the setup tab, the tracker tab, and the dashboard that we are creating. And it will be available to my paid Patreon members. If you want to support me, that's another way you can. Thank you to my current Patreon subscribers. All right, let's keep going. Back to our example. This formula right here, it's basically the difference between these two. So your income minus your expenses, or your budget minus your expenses. And it's showing up as green because we have applied conditional formatting. So we'll do that next in our template. Here, we're going to first apply the formula, which will be equals. This will be 7 minus D7. So hit enter. It is $8,000, which is a positive number. We're going to apply conditional formatting. We want this number to be green if it's positive, and we want it to be red if it's negative. So to do this, we're going to go to fill color and just select conditional formatting from here. All right. And then what we're going to do is to change the rule. So format rules, click on that rule, select the one that says greater than or equal to, and for the value, add 0. So if it is 0 or greater than 0, it means that we are on budget or under budget, which is a good thing. So we want the color to be green. So it's going to show this green background color. You can take it out. So change that to none. And we're going to apply the color for the text. Change that to green. Click done. Add another rule to the same cell. Now we're going to select if it's less than. Okay, so anything less than 0 means that we've exceeded our budget. So change this to none. We're going to change the color to red and click done. All right, so now it's showing up as green because we have a surplus. Let's make some changes to see if the conditional formatting works. For website redesign, we're going to assign that a budget or income of $6,000. Go back to the setup tab, change that to, from $15,000, we're going to change it to $6,000. All right, so when we go back to our dashboard, it works the way it's supposed to because 6,000 minus 7,000 is 1,000, but negative 1,000 because the expenses exceed the budget by 1,000 and it shows up in red. So it works the way it's supposed to. Next, we're going to complete these 3 boxes here for all the projects. Looking at formula here, it's a sum formula, so we're just adding up all of the amounts from the setup tab. Go back here. This would be equal sum tab, and go back to our setup tab, and we're essentially just adding up this number here. Okay, and enter. The next tab for the expenses will be equals, and it's also a sum formula, equals sum, and it's going to be sum of all the expenses. So back to the tracker tab, go to the column with the amounts, and I'm just going to select a few of them and then remove the number for the row. So it says E14 here, we're just going to remove that. Once you do that, it selects everything all the way down to 1,000 and hit enter. All right, so we have the sum showing up here. And then for here, it's the same formula we'd used here. So we can just copy this formula, all right, and just paste it here. And because we're copying and pasting the formula without doing paste special, we're also pasting the conditional formatting so we don't have to do it all over again. So you can see that this shows up as green because the difference between these two is a positive number. If we were to go to the setup tab to just play around with the numbers a little bit, so let's make this really low. So let's say 1000 and let's make this 500. I just want to make the numbers really low so we can have a negative number. So as you can see, the total expenses exceed the total income/budget. So we have a shortage and it shows up in red, which is exactly what we want. Just change the numbers back to the original numbers. Next, we're going to work on our graphs. First, we'll do these two graphs, category distribution and subcategory distribution. All right, so we'll leave this row blank. The graph headers will go here and then the graphs will go here. Right click, change this to 300. All right, select these three columns, merge. So this can be category distribution. And then we have subcategory distribution. Okay, merge these cells as well. The graphs are going to go in here and add some borders around the area. So I'm just doing borders around the header and border around the entire section and using the paint format to apply the same here. Next, I'm going to add some colors. So go ahead and add the colors that you want to show up in your template. First, we'll work on the category distribution charts. To create the chart that goes in here, we're first going to click on Insert Chart. So the icon should be up at the top next to the filter icon. Click on that. Change this from column to pie chart. And then we're going to select the data range. All right, so just click on the icon that says Select Data Range and go to our Tracker tab. We need two columns. So the first column is the column with the category. So this one. So I'm just going to select a few of them and remove the row number. And that's what allows you to select everything. So it doesn't show up here, but it will select the entire column. And now we also need to select the amount. So we use Add Another Range, click on that. And now we're going to do the same thing, select the amounts. So I'm just selecting a few of them and remove everything after E. So now we have G5 to G, so everything's selected here. And the second column we have is E5, so the amounts to E selected, all right? And then click OK. So when we go back here, it's showing each transaction, which is not what we want. We want it to be in aggregate. So you see this box that says aggregate? Click on that. So once we do this, it's going to pull all the categories together and then I just pull it down to this area and just resize it so it fits nicely in this area. And I'm going to remove this border because we already have a border around this section. We don't need another one. So click Edit Chart, Customize, and I'll remove the background color as well and remove the border color. And if you want to change the legend, all you need to do is go to Legend and you can change this from this auto style to either left or right or whatever you want. I will leave it as auto and then work on the next graph. And it's the same thing. We'll start with clicking on Insert Charts, click on the Select Data Range, go back to our example. All right, we'll select the first column, which is H, just selecting a few of them, remove 14 or whatever the number is that is the last row that you have selected. Add another range, add the amounts. Do the same thing. So we have H5 to H, and for the amount E5 to E, click OK. And we did not change the chart type, so I'll go ahead and do that now. Change it to pie chart, click on aggregate and customize it by removing the background color and the border color, and then just move it into the space. Perfect. So back to the example. The last thing we need to do is to add the monthly expenses. The horizontal axis will have the month and the year, and the vertical axis will have the amounts. All right, so 12 would be the header. So just select that, merge cells, and just type monthly expenses as the header. And then for 13, right click, make this 400. And add the colors that you want to your headers. For the section where the graph is going to go, select everything. I'm just going to merge it and add borders, just like we did with the graphs above. Okay, so for this graph, we're going to repeat the same steps. Click on Insert Charts, Data Range, go back to our table. We want to graph these two sections here. And here's the reason why we created this additional column, because we're going to use it to create the graph. We don't want the dates, we want the month and the year all grouped together. All right, so what we're going to do is select these two columns. So we'll start by selecting column D and E, dragging down. So now if you look here, you can see that it selected column D4. Starting from D4, we're also including the headers for this selection to E10. So if we remove E10, it's going to do the same thing. What this essentially means is that it's selecting all of column D and all of column E. Okay, So we don't have to add additional range because they're right next to each other. Click OK. And then when we go here, you can see it's showing up like this. So we don't want it to show up like this. So we need to make some changes. First, I'm going to remove the month and the year that's showing up under series. So just click in on the three dots and click remove. All right, so now only the amount shows up, which is what we want. Now we need to add the month and year to the x-axis. So click here and click on the month and the year. All right, so now just like we did before, we want to click aggregate, because if you look at it now, it's showing individual bars for each entry, which is not what we want. We want one bar for all of February 2025, one bar for all of March 2025, etc. So click aggregate. So now that it looks close to what we want, all we need to do now is remove the background color and the border color, and then we can just readjust, place it right here. All right, so now you can see it has February, March, April, May, June, July. The last entry is September because that's the last entry entered into this template. And if you want it to look like this, where each bar is a different color, you have to do that manually. Back to your graph, we're going to change the individual colors for each bar. Let's start with March. Double click. Once we double click, we want to click one more time, so it's only selecting this bar. So you can see the blue line is only around this bar that says March 2025. Now that we have that selected, go to fill color. Let's change it to this green color. Now you have to do is click on the next one. Just click once. And you're just looking for the blue line to surround the bar that you want to change the color to, and change the color. Just repeat the steps until all the colors have been assigned to what you want. All right. So another thing I want to show you is that you see how the numbers show up here. We could also do the same thing. So to do this, go back to your graph, edit charts. That would be under series. So click on series, scroll all the way down. Now check this box that says data label. So once we check that, it automatically adds the amounts here. And you can change the position if you want. So it shows up at the top. You can change it to center, inside base, inside, or you can change it to outside and where it shows up like, all right. And I'm going to leave it like this, but the only thing I'm going to do is change the color here, make this black because it's a lighter color of the bar, but we want the text to show up. So we'll make that black. Finally, click on view, show, and remove grid lines. And if we go back to our example, you can see that we have completed all the steps. So let's go back to our tutorial checklist. So we completed the dashboard, structure and design, theme colors, we added the formulas, we added the graphs. All right, and I already talked about my Patreon membership, but just to reiterate, this template that we have created today, so the dashboard tab, the expense tracker tab, and the setup tab, if you don't want to go through creating it yourself from scratch, it will be available to my Patreon members, so my paid subscribers. In addition to that, you'll get the other template that I have created for my Patreon members on my YouTube channel. So let's just cross this off, and I'm going to show you the demo copy of a template that I have for sale. I do have a project and event planner template for sale. I always want to create a free version of the template I have for sale, because if you're getting started with a project and you're not sure where it's going to go, or starting a new business, start with a free version of the template. If you want something more robust, go ahead and check out the template that I have for sale. So I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so here's the template I have for sale. This is the project expense tracker, but I have another version of this template that is called the events expense tracker. So those two templates will be available, and I'll leave links down in the description box. So first we have a setup tab, a tracker tab, which is very similar to what we have created. The main difference would be the dashboards. We have two dashboards. We have the project dashboard, which is where you can select your project name, and it gives you more detailed information about the project. So you can see summary charts and tables. And then we have a multi-project dashboard. So it looks at all your projects across the board for all of your entries in your tracker, and it provides you summary information for all of them. So you will get the same thing with the event tracker tab, where you have an event dashboard as well as a multi-event dashboard, so you can see specific information or everything put together for your personal project or your business. So that is all I have for today's tutorial. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.